Welcome to We Have a Plant for That, where we share stories of hope planted with purpose. So guess who we have today? We're very fortunate to have Andrew Berg here with us to share his 3 roles. So, you are the chief storyteller for Save the Sibley Prairie Coalition. You're the director of development for Friends of the Rouge and the executive producer of the infamous or famous Oak Park Garden Tour.
Yes.
So, why don't we begin at the beginning for your native plant journey? Because a lot of times that's what we want to hear. How did each person get involved with native plants? And that's before we get to your other exciting projects that you have your roles in. So let's start with the beginning. What role did you play in your childhood? As your dad was a wildlife-biologist, your grandmother was a volunteer for Audubon.
Nature was always really present in our lives. My grandmother, who you were mentioning, volunteered for Audubon for many years. She taught probably 2 decades of school children about DDT and its dangers and why we need to protect bald eagle and the brown pelican, and really did that in addition to helping to raise 5 kids and be a volunteer in lots of other places. I think that helped to inform my father's experience. He studied wildlife biology, and he likes to joke that he didn't get one of the 2 jobs available in the early 70s when he graduated. He tried being a ranger part-time for a couple of years. This was before van life was a hashtag. He was living out west and giving nature tours and then hanging around the campsite hoping that they would feed him. Eventually his mom said, we're going to meet a girl like that, you got to do something else. So he ended up having a separate career as a civil servant with the Social Security Administration. And even my mother was also a civil servant. She went back to school and became a librarian. So we always read books about all these different environments and things. So I felt really informed. I come from a multiracial adoptive family. Most of our vacations were camping and exploring, and my dad would walk around and teach us how to identify trees. You have to pay attention to the bark because half the year there's no leaves. So you have to look at the bark to be able to understand. Now at the time, as a kid, I was always more interested in birds, right? And then large animals, bears and wolves, other things that are exciting when you're a kid. But that was always present, and even as a kid we did a lot of volunteering. I remember volunteering for Rouge Rescue, which is the cleanup done by Friends of the Rouge. That's another tie-in, and lots of other projects where it was about being outside and understanding that we have an obligation to be stewards of our environment.
What does that mean for you to carry this forward?
Well, I think about my family and the people that came before me and the people that came before them. It's the question is, well, if I'm a steward, I'm just a temporary caretaker. Am I leaving this place better than I found it? Am I helping to teach others? Am I offering information and inspiration? Am I teaching my own kids and other people's kids in that same way? And so that's how I think about it, is that it's going to look and feel different at different times and different places. I'm trying to continue that tradition and make a positive impact.
So that's great. A lot different from how many people were raised. So that's, you have those roots. Did that also include, did we talk about volunteering, and how does that carry over today? We just guess, I bet that carried over.
It certainly did. So many of the projects that I've gotten involved in started because I just wanted to learn, or I was excited. Even though I had different career trajectories and all sorts of other things, there was always that through line with nature and wildlife and wilderness.
Let's see, what pulled you towards native plants specifically? Because you talked about things that you liked in nature when you were a kid, but native plants seem to have their own world and space, and I've noticed that working with Rochester pollinators,
Right.
that it resonates with people in a certain way.
It does. I was always living in apartments in Chicago. I never had any outdoor space of my own to really care for. I was at the Nature Museum and I did the bike camping stuff, so I was aware of native plants, but I didn't really have my own hook into them. But when I moved back here 5 years ago, I was renting for a year and then I bought a place in Oak Park. And one of the things I knew when I was coming back, I said, if I'm going to come back, because it was a big lifestyle change. I was a car-free cyclist. To come back, in Michigan we have to drive most places, and it was going to be different. I said, but I want to have access to some of the wilderness and wildlife that I was traveling to. I want that in my own backyard. And how do I create that if I can't find it. And that's really what launched me into the native plant world. I didn't really know much, but I'm the kind of person, if you can't tell if I'm excited, if I have a spark, then I really follow that calling. Somebody said, oh, you should look at Friends of the Rouge, and I bought some plants from their native plant sale, and then I said, okay, because I had a bunch of stuff that was just overgrown that I needed to rip out anyway, so I said, oh, well, I could put native plants in, and then they had Rain Gardens to the Rescue course to teach you about rain gardens. I said, oh, let me go do that, and that was a 5 or 6 week course over the summer. So you really got to have a lot of information and context, and also connections with other people who were doing things, and that were going to build their own, and there was a support network of like-minded folks. Once I got in, then I started reading all sorts of different things, and I just got so excited about the possibility of supporting wildlife in so many different ways. The plants in and of themselves, I just love. I'm so excited by seeing what every day I try to spend at least half hour or more. I could spend all day. But if at the end, after I come home from work, I take my shoes off and I walk around the garden. There's a new bloom, something just bloomed, something is just closed. What are the bees doing? What are the butterflies doing? Do I see any caterpillars? And really just noticing nature at a very small scale in a slow time is so rewarding. That's what I've gotten so excited about. I've read a lot, and then all of the other stuff, the supporting pollinators, supporting my watershed by having deep-rooted plants that can help absorb this and reduce runoff. All the things that it does to reduce urban heat island. All of these other benefits are a bonus.
I always say it's the gift that keeps on giving.
I've read a lot of books, people like Doug Talmy, who you had on before, and then others like Benjamin Vogt, who I think is really interesting, who's a practitioner, but also is writing about things like that. His book is Prairie Up. He's got a couple of different books. So people like that, and then others as well. And then also going back in time, looking at Elder Leopold or other earlier voices, or more contemporaneously, Robin Wall Kimmerer, who are the people that I can learn from, and then be in conversation with others about this big thing that we're all just trying to do our little piece.
In our own backyard, which I found really, it resonates with people who don't know anything about native plants. Many times the gateway is the monarch butterfly, and you explain to them how without this plant, milkweed, these butterflies, monarch specifically, won't survive. And they're like, give it to me, where do I plant it? What part of my yard? How do I get involved? The kids love butterflies, and it's just a lovely conversation that I have with people if they're interested. And some people already have native plant gardens and they want to share. They bring pictures, they say, hey, this was the caterpillar that was in my backyard. So we do a lot of tabling events. I talk to a lot of people who start with 1 or 2 plants you did, and they just find joy. Many of them come to me and say, I've gotten addicted. So you started with a few plants.
Yes.
So let's go back to your garden and its evolution.
So I started just around the borders, which is what a lot of people do. It's easy to just
line them up.
Yeah, and that's what I tell people all the time. You get a native kit, it's 38, more or less. Anybody can do that. So that's what I did. I just started lighting the borders. But then I started researching the plants, and then I said, I could probably squeeze some more in here, and some more in there. But the first year was really just very beginner and just lining the perimeter of the yard where there had been vegetation, but it was overgrown and I needed to remove stuff. And so I had taken the Rain Gardens to the Rescue course. That was really helpful and opened my eyes to more on the native plants. I didn't build my rain garden that summer because I was so busy. I'll plan this over the winter, and it'll be a great winter project is to plan. And so then anybody who gardens knows when it's 10 degrees outside and you can't dig in the dirt, all you want to do is think about gardening. I found that's the best time to plant because I can put that productivity that it would be digging in the dirt into planting. I started planting more areas to convert from lawn into gardens. I planned my rain garden, and then my kind of signature piece in the backyard is my pollinated prairie. And I'm fortunate. I'm in Oak Park. It's an inner ring suburb, for folks who don't know. In the early 50s, it was the fastest growing city in America, according to them. It's kind of classic 50s ranches and bungalows and not huge lots, but there's a lot of shade trees. I'm fortunate in that I don't really have any shade trees casting shade in my backyard. So that means I can plant full sun in there. So that opened the palette up for me to do all of the full sun loving prairie plant, and I got really excited about prairie plants. Then I really thought about that, and then that's when the design started coming in. So I said, okay, I know I have about this much space to work with. What could that look like? And I started thinking, if I'm a corner house too, I'm looking from the sidewalk, how do I create a visual crescendo where I start with shorter, then medium-sized, then tall, and then giant, so that there's this wave that crests into beautiful flowers, starting with everything from as short as butterfly weed and world milkweed or hairy vervain, getting up into some of the medium grasses and then the tall grasses, so the big blue stem and the Indian grass, and then finishing with kind of a wave of silphiums and ironweeds. And that was the thing that captured my imagination the most, that I'd never really seen. I think that's the other thing about native plant gardening that's so fun, is you can look at lots of other examples, but you get to just try something. And you get to say, well, let me see if this works.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't, the worst case is I move a plant, or I give it to somebody else, or try again next year. But that was what got me the most excited about really creating a visual tapestry that would also have all of these other benefits. I was also really excited about maximizing diversity. So I have a spreadsheet where I keep track of all my plants.
Oh, you do? Wow.
I organized my layout in spreadsheets so that I could populate all the cells, think about it that way. If you start with a big area, it can be really overwhelming.
Yeah,
but to
it
just
can.
say, okay, let me do a row of this. I know I want to get this tall, so what gets this tall? And I want early blooms, and I want late blooms, and I want a couple of things that'll come in at different times. I want to balance color and texture. And then all of a sudden, you're composing an orchestra or something. Establish a motif, and so then it just starts writing itself, or the garden starts designing itself. And that's one of the things that I find so exciting and rewarding. I try to be really intentional. My backyard is where my tallest things are, but in my rain garden I have tall ironweed, I have tall sunflower that are each getting 6 or 8 feet. They're pretty big.
So it's more curated, there's intention, cues of care, as they say.
Yeah, the cues of care, I pay a lot of attention to cues of care, so I make sure I'm not flopping onto sidewalks. I have pathways that
pathways through it.
You
Yes.
can clearly see I've done that. You can look at it and see that it's very well managed and taken care of. The other thing I do is I have a ton of signage. And so you can't look at my garden without knowing that somebody is really intentional about what's happening.
Planting with purpose, yes.
I probably have around a dozen habitat certifications, and so I have most of those signs either at various points or on the chain link fence, see through. So as people are walking by, they see all of these different things, that I see people stop and take a picture. It makes it interactive, and I have people say all the time, oh, I love what you're doing. Or they'll ask me questions. How does the rain barrel connect to the downspout? I said, here, let me show you. So I say every day is garden tour of my house. Because if I'm out gardening and somebody walks by and has a question, take time to show them. And that's one-on-one teaching and sharing can happen. And even with the joyful things we were talking about, getting people excited about butterflies. I had a monarch on my purple milkweed. I have 8 species of milkweed on my property. I had one host on the purple milkweed, which is on my front, right on my front walkway. And one of my neighbors down the street is 4. Every time she comes by, she's riding her little bike, they'll stop and they want to look and see. So I was really excited to show her this butterfly. And then it went into chrysalis, and it climbed over into the purple milkweed to get into chrysalis. And then Sunday morning, I went out to check, and it had just come out. So I texted her dad, and I said, hey, if you want to see it, you got to come over now. And they came down, and she was just so delighted to be able to see it, drying, and you could see the chrysalis right there next to it. And then an hour later, we probably would have missed it.
Oh my God, great.
And so being able to share that, not just with my kids who get that and are really excited about that kind of stuff too, but with other kids in the neighborhood and people is it's a lot of fun. But back to the design, I love thinking about how to mix and match, and I'm always trying to challenge myself to do different things. So like Benjamin Vogt, he's all about matrix.
Yes,
planting.
he is. Can you describe that a little?
The idea is really to have a green mulch where you've got grasses or sedges really forming the understory of the planting, and also creating much more diversity and root competition in a smaller space. Even Doug Tallamy said in one of his recent things, if you can see the soil, you're going to have enough plants, right?
Okay.
So the idea of the green mulch and the matrix is you have a base layer of grasses or sedges that are all planted typically on 1 foot center apart from each other, and then you add the flowers in. So that they're growing up just as they would in the prairie. They're growing up all kind of intermingled, and they strengthen each other, and they're fighting for resources, which makes them more sturdy and upright, and they don't flop as much.
Right.
They're less likely to. And so if you plant them all at the same time, then they'll do that. If you let the big grasses grow and then you try to throw some flowers in, it's a lot harder to do that later, although some of them can figure it out.
So what you're saying is you didn't do the matrix as much.
I didn't initially. I've done it in my later ones, and then I've gone back and I've added more grasses into my existing plantings to try to encourage more grasses. I always had grasses. I think I have 28 or 29 species of grasses and sedges, but the two sections I put in maybe about 400 or so plants this spring. Cut out 2 new sections in my front yard. That was all matrix.
But I also understand, did we say how many species you have in your garden?
I have 227 by my count.
127.
Species.
That is absolutely amazing.
I just updated it the other day. I keep track, and now I'm not going to remember quite exactly, but it's about 85% are native to Oakland County or Southeast Michigan.
That's great.
Right here. And I have a couple Midwest natives that are near native to us. So that's my focus, is I want as much as I can that's incredibly local.
Well, thank you for sharing your story about your garden. So that gets us to a actual bigger garden, the Sibley Prairie.
So Sibley Prairie is, for those folks that don't know, it's a 440-acre parcel in south central Wayne County in Brownstown Township. As the crow flies, it's about 15 miles from downtown Detroit. The West Brownstown Creek runs through there. It's in the combined downriver watershed, for those that are thinking about where water flows.
They really should.
And it's right along Telegraph Road.
Oh, it is?
So it borders Telegraph on the east side.
So all these years, it has not been developed.
Most of it has not been developed. There's a little section on the south of the parcel that was developed by the company that owns it years ago, but then that's all been
So the
cleared
company
out.
just left it.
They never used all of it. And there's a railroad that runs through northwest
Okay.
corner. But the vast majority of it has never been farmed and it's never been developed. And that's why it's the largest remaining Lake Plain prairie remnant in the state of Michigan.
That's amazing.
It's part of this, what they call the Greater Sibley Prairie Road Complex. There are other pockets nearby, including the West Prairie site, which is owned by the Southeast Michigan Land Conservancy, about 43 acres, I think.
Okay.
So it's part of this much larger region that has been lost to development, but it's a space that a coalition of, I think there are 13 organizations now, have come together to try to purchase and preserve. And in terms of native plants, one of the things that makes it so unique is when the FI Natural Resources Inventory did their work to confirm what was there. I think they found 198 species of native plants. And just to define things for folks, Lake Plain Prairie is a type of tallgrass prairie. A lot of people don't realize that Michigan had tallgrass prairie. We're at this eastern edge of mixed forest and prairie openings that really extended from Illinois into parts of Indiana, Ohio, Michigan, and even into southern Ontario. And Lake Plain is this type of prairie where you have a thick layer of clay and then sand on top. And what that means is that the groundwater has trouble rising, and the rainwater, or the snow melt, slowly drains very slowly. And what that means is you have flooding in the late winter, early spring. So you have ducks swimming, and then a couple months later, it's all dry, and you have these tall grasses and silphiums in the same place. It's this region where it stretched from Chicago through northwest Indiana, parts of Michigan, and then a little bit into Ontario, and almost all of it. Of course, these are all big cities now. Toledo was in Toledo.
Wow.
Most of it's gone. And it's got just really unheard of ecological biodiversity. When they score this for floristic quality, something like 30 or 40 is good. This was a 67.
And it didn't turn into a forest. That was
It's certainly more forested than it was 100 years ago. There are aerial photos, and you can see there's more forest than there was 100 years ago, and that's for two reasons. Primarily hydrology. The flooding that we talked about, like I said, there's a creek that runs through there. Of course, we've altered water in so many ways. There's less water flowing there, so you have less flooding. And Lake Plain, all prairie has fire that helps regenerate it, but we, of course, have got red fire. And then the other piece is we used to have bison and Michigan. So, you know, predation is another thing that helps.
And predation is what?
When
Chewing it, eating it?
and eating the little woody plants that come up that can't handle being eaten, whereas our herbaceous perennials, you can eat the whole thing and they've got so much roots down there, they'll just pop back up the next year. They're used to that. They evolve with all that. So by changing all of that, certainly it's created space for more woods, but there's still a lot of prairie there. All of these groups have really come together.
I see what you brought here.
Yeah, I have a little show and tell.
Yes,
so this
you
is
do.
the
You
book,
Save It, Don't Pave It.
Save It, Don't Pave It, the tall grass prairie in Detroit's backyard. This is online if you go to savesibleyprairie.org. This is, and it's the case for preservation. And so it really gives, and then our kind of subtitle
Oh,
is,
this is very...
and it really talks and walks and shows in a really easy visual way what we talked about. So what's the prairie anyway? It shows maps, we have figures, we have photographs, all these different things. I wrote and art directed this, and I had help from other contributors and people that were generous enough to allow us to use photos and images and illustrations. All of these are prairie plants. You probably recognize most of those.
I do recognize a lot here, yeah.
And even something, will be harder to see, but just showing what's the difference between prairie, savanna, woodland, and it's just tree density. And you can see that in an illustration really easily. We were talking about compost plants earlier. This is 15 or 16 foot.
That's your favorite plant.
The stalk that has the first bloom open is probably about 8 or 9 feet right now. And they'll get maybe even 10 feet.
They're impressive. These plants that are tall like carpet compass, I think you almost have to have some kind of relationship with them. They just have a presence.
And in addition to the plants, we talked about why it's important. What I wanted to really share here was that the work that all of us are doing, whether that's at home, in a business, municipalities, or others, it creates this archipelago of nature and connection. That the butterfly that was here can fly to Sibley Prairie or up here, or
or to Mexico.
But also for our rare grassland birds, of which have already been extirpated from Michigan because of habitat loss, plus migrating birds. I think it's 6 or 7 of the 9 bat species in Michigan have been documented in Sibley Prairie.
So you have a lot of support, and you're trying to raise $6 million.
We have to raise $6 million by December of this year to purchase the property, and then of course
Manage and maintain it.
yeah, and get rid of invasives and all these other things. Because even though it has never been developed, it's under the same pressures from
wonderful invasives.
From invasive species, and then making it ready for people, trails and like that.
So can enjoy it,
exactly,
but also preserve its wildlife as well.
And so property readiness and stewardship and restoration, and then helping it shine so that folks can access it and have a really great experience that also helps teach them some things.
So if people want to help, what were your ideas about people helping? One of them's donate.
It's always donate.
There's other things.
Yes, we certainly welcome gifts, but we're also looking for volunteers and ambassadors. We have folks that are helping doing tabling events, spreading the word, helping with social media, getting into the press, things like that, serving on various committees, whether that's fundraising, publicity, stewardship. If you're somebody that really wants to help come up with a plan for how to make this property ready once we acquire it, those types of things. Talking to elected officials and representatives, getting their support. We would welcome designated funds from the legislature and anything like that, any appropriations or things like that. So there's a lot of things people can do, and if they go to savesibleyprairie.org, they can find out more.
Yeah. I'm going to take a guess that you might love to tell us about the upcoming Oak Park Garden Tour.
Was it my shirt that gave me away?
I think it was. I think it was.
I'm happy to. I wanted to meet other people that had a passion for caring for the earth and digging in the dirt. There had been some folks that had tried to do one or had maybe done one a couple years before, but it was very different. And so I said, I'll do it if nobody else is going to do it. But I really thought about it differently. I wanted to have something that was radically inclusive. A lot of people think gardening and they think very formal English estate garden where you need to be a master gardener to even think of touching a plant. And if you don't have a huge budget or a huge property, it's not even worth it. I knew that was not true. Let me just try to put something together. If I build it, maybe they'll come. And so it's funny because this is now the 3rd year of the Revive Tour. So this was 3 years ago. I posted a bunch in social media, but I wasn't really getting anywhere. And then I said, I just got to do old school. I'll go door to door. I mean, Oak Park is only 5 square miles. So there's maybe 30,000 people. I didn't hit every door. I made my son ride bikes with me, and we would ride up and down. And if I saw somebody that looked like they were gardening. I
Okay.
would leave a flyer, or if they were out, I would talk to them. First of all, as you probably know, it fostered so much great interaction. It was just the best way to meet people.
Yeah, people get worried about knocking on doors. It's not as scary as I thought it was. Or just seeing people working out in your yard. Go,
Right.
hey, you could tell right away. They don't
Right.
want to talk, but some of them were like, oh, hi.
Yeah. Oh, that looks, what's that?
Yeah.
That looks great.
Many
They
of
loved
them
to
love to talk about their garden.
But I also noticed, and this is why this reinforced my instinct for radical inclusivity, a lot of places, Park Included has one of these beautification awards that is
Yes.
really, I like to say, just because our houses were built in the 50s doesn't mean that our gardening has to be stuck there. Groups like that really do reward a very chemical dependent, unhealthy for the environment, this very strict aesthetic that really you can't do without fertilizers. And
Try to get rid
lawn.
of every weed, want to
Yeah.
make it look like a carpet.
Exactly. And so when sometimes I would say, here's what I'm doing. Are you judging? Are you from the beautification community? I said, oh, no. I said, first of all, who am I to judge? Okay?
Yeah, that's
I'm
right.
trying not to judge myself,
Exactly.
let alone anybody else. I had one woman say to me, she said, she had a couple of raised beds in her front yard, which is why I stopped. And she said, I don't know, am I a gardener? Is this enough? I said, do you grow things? She said, yeah. I said, you're a gardener. I said, do
Yeah.
you want to meet other people in the neighborhood that like to grow things too? She said, yeah. I said, you're in. I said, this is like Halloween for plant people. For Halloween, you flip the light on, you're in.
Yeah.
And that's the way that I wanted it to be from a garden. Now, I'm, if you can't tell, a native plant evangelist and an enthusiast, so I will talk about native plants ad nauseum. But I also understood you got to have a big tent.
Yeah, I totally
and
agree.
you got to meet people where they are. And they're not going to listen to me if I
Just
right
tell
off the
them
bat think that they're doing it all wrong.
Exactly. You're singing to the choir right now. Makes
So,
all the difference.
I went door to door, I left a lot of flyers, and we had 42 gardens that first year. I couldn't believe it.
So you went from 8 to 42?
In just 2 or 3 weeks.
Oh my gosh.
And I even met my partner through gardening. I left a flyer on her door.
Oh.
I saw some purple coneflower and a bunch of other stuff, and I left the flyer and she said, hey, I'd love to participate, but I want to talk, I want to learn more and figure it out. And we started talking, and she said, why don't you come see my gardens? So now she's, now in the party, she's co-chair and creative director. And then bringing everybody together, we had a big after party at my house afterwards. I walked around and I said, let me show everybody what I'm doing. And these were all the hosts of the garden that had their own gardens, but many of them didn't really know anything about native plants. And so they said, after I walked them through what I had done, they said, well, where do I go? What do I do?
Where do I go?
That's when I
Yes.
said, okay, I started writing this up, and then I eventually put it all on the Garden Tour website. If I'm gonna write it up once,
Repurpose.
I want to just be able to.
And those 3 jobs
send
you
it.
do, yeah, don't keep reinventing the wheel.
Even something like my rain garden, I have a step-by-step. I took pictures at every stage
Oh,
because
good.
I'm going to want to be able to share this with, and you don't see enough. You'll see before and after, but what about in between? So
Yeah.
I dug, and then I put the sharp sand, and then I put the compost, and then I put a mix of compost and topsoil, and then I put the plants, and then I put the mulch. I have pictures of all of that.
You do?
I have them linked in Google Docs. I think it's on the website, but I also share it anytime anybody
Okay,
asks
good
to
to
see that I
know.
have a written, here's what I did, and then I have an accompanying Google photo album.
Excellent.
So,
To see that.
I'd be
That
happy to
YouTube
share.
video, yeah.
And so when somebody, like for Garden Tour or elsewise, if
Yes.
somebody comes by and they ask about, how do I do a rain garden? And that was also based on that feedback I got was, where do I go from here? How do I do this?
Okay.
And I said, I'm not an expert, I know a lot, but
Yeah.
let me bring in the pros. Let me bring in people that are doing this every day and offer some of that to others. And so that's where kind of the resource fair came in. And we did it dispersed so that as you go around, you can see all these different things. So this year, it's always the last Sunday in July, so July 26th, and that's from 1 to 5. I think we'll probably have around 30 gardens this year, 15 organizations. We'll have some native plant vendors, and we're always looking to be creative. We'll have Book Beat again, this literary garden with all these different titles. It's an independent bookstore.
yeah.
They helped create, with the help of Sarah, our co-chair, a really great selection of titles for people that want to learn more. So the goal is to really to get people all of the information that they need to start making a difference in their yard. And again, that inclusivity. The other thing at Bookbeat, Wild Ones North Oakland will be there, and their focus is native plants for containers. I
Oh,
spent
yes.
15 years in an apartment buildings, never having outdoor space I could do anything with. I think probably 40% of oak parkers are renters. So how do we make sure that we're giving everybody the opportunity to support wildlife, whether that's in a planter, you could put something on your stoop, on the balcony, in a parking lot, on the sidewalk. There's all sorts of things people can do, and that's part of what we're trying to show people is you don't need a huge space, or really any space.
And the information you have here is
oakparkgardentour.com. We also feature people that have just started in their planting journey, that are a year or two in, and then we've had people that have been in their homes for 50 years. So you kind of get the gamut, which is always what I tell people is you can look at the people that are really advanced, and that's exciting, but make sure you check out somebody that's 2 or 3 years in. That gives you a sense of what's possible and how you can start building.
Well, it sounds like a fabulous community event, and anything that has anything to do with native plants, you know I'm all about that. Well, thank you, Andrew, for sharing all that great information about the upcoming Oak Park Garden Tour. I can't wait to go.
Thank you.
So, Andrew, do you have any parting thoughts?
Well, first I just want to say thank you for hosting Maryland. It's been an absolute delight to be able to talk about native plants and why they matter, and to get to nerd out. I saw the swamp milkweed when I was coming in. I was like, okay, I'm in the right place.
Yeah.
In all of the ways. In all of the ways.
Yes, for sure.
But I think just a reminder for anybody out there that's curious about this, is feeling maybe excited but also a little overwhelmed, because it can be overwhelming. It's just to start small. One plant, you can go from there, and you don't have to redo everything like I did. But we can make positive differences. And I'll give a really concrete example of that. In one of my neighborhood groups, somebody was posting about not seeing lightning bugs. And I just responded and said, there's 4 concrete things you can do. Then I linked to firefly.org. One of those things was turn off your lights at night. And somebody later in that whole thread said, oh, I'm going to turn my lights off. I didn't realize that was part of the problem. And it just, something, that's not even planting something. It's just making a small behavioral change, because half of our insects are nocturnal.
Yeah.
And turning off those big bright outside lights can make such a big difference. So remembering that it's all of those things add up. They all make a difference. This is a quote that I put in the Sibley Prairie Case for Preservation, but it's one that I'll end on, because it helps me think about the connection. This is from A River Runs Through It and Other Stories by Norman MacLean. He says, eventually all things merge into one, and a river runs through it. The river was cut by the world's great flood, and runs over rocks from the basement of time. On some of those rocks are timeless raindrops. And I think about that, and I think about our role as stewards. These are the water that falls, those timeless raindrops. This is our moment to help direct them in a way, or give them a place to land that will help the earth, and then it'll be somebody else's turn. And that, keeping that in mind, helps me stay grounded and centered, and also grateful for the opportunity that we have to be stewards of the earth.
Well, thank you so much, Andrew Berg, for joining us. It was absolutely delightful
Absolutely.
speaking with you.
Thank you.
Yeah.